What if stop signs came in pink squares, lime green ovals, or turquoise triangles, depending on the changing whims of a town and a few of their residents? Imagine the ensuing traffic jams and accidents. Repeating design elements and a consistent use of type and graphics within a document shows a reader where to go and helps them to navigate your design layouts safely. For the most part, people prefer organized visual information. Newsletters, magazines, brochures, annual reports, and books often have many visual elements: columns of text, headlines, photos, illustrations, pull quotes, etc. Grids allow the designer to build page-by-page consistency into these documents. You already use repetition in your work. When you make a headline all the same size and weight, when you add a rule a half an inch from the bottom of each page, when you use the same bullet in each list throughout the project, these are all examples of repetition. What beginners often need to do is to push this idea further, turn that inconspicuous repetition into a visual key that ties the publication together. Repetition can be thought of as consistency. As you look through a 16-page newsletter, it is repetition of certain elements and their consistency that makes each of those 8 pages appear to belong to the same newsletter. If page 7 has no repetitive elements carried over from page 4, then the entire newsletter loses its cohesive look and feel. Repetition is important in all designs, whether they are single pages or multi-page documents. When you use repetition, your pages will be stronger. They'll be more interesting to look at, and the strong design will imply that you have sophisticated control over the page. But repetition goes beyond just being naturally consistent. It's a conscious effort to unify all parts of the design. Just as a musician repeats notes to form a unifying melody in a song, so too can you use repeating visual elements to form a unifying structure in your page. One primary purpose of the principle of repetition is to tie together the otherwise separate visual components of the design. Repeating visual elements, such as lines, shapes, images, textures, and so on, forms a visual rhythm that strengthens the overall organization of design and makes it seem more unified and cohesive. Rhythm in design is also called repetition. Rhythm allows your designs to develop an internal consistency that makes it easier for your viewers to understand. Once the brain recognizes the pattern in the rhythm, it can relax and understand the whole design. Repetition rarely occurs on its own, and so it imbues a sense of order into the design. And because of this, repetition attracts attention and prompts viewers to investigate further. Nearly anything in a layout can be repeated to create a rhythm in your design. You can repeat a headline multiple times for emphasis. You can repeat an image across the top of your design. And you can create a patterned background with repetitive elements, or repeat a style throughout the pages of your layout to provide consistency. Repetition requires that the designer deliberately seek out and apply visual elements consistently to a page. Seeking out and applying consistent visual elements to your pages may seem to be as simple as repeating lines or images throughout a page. Repeating visual elements doesn't necessarily mean that the elements have to be identical. You can vary the thickness of a line or use a standard font face throughout the piece with similar headline treatments, but perhaps some of the headlines differ in color. Many beginning designers already use the principle of repetition in their designs, at least in some small way. When a designer uses a visual element, two or more visual elements twice in a design, like bullets, lines, initial caps, and so on, that designer is already using repetition. What many beginning designers fail to do is to really stress repetition in their designs. Their designs are often weaker than they have to be, not because of the complete lack of repetition, but because the designer didn't seek out enough opportunities to apply repetition. To fully utilize the power of repetition means that the designer has to seek out visual elements to repeat and to really stress consistency in the application of the visual elements on the page. When a designer repeats some visual aspect of a design, the overall page reaps the benefits and seems more unified. Unity is achieved when all separate elements on a page look as if they belong together. The human eye seeks unity. When no unity is found, readers will lose interest. A unified design is easier for the reader to read. It's easier to remember, and easier to absorb the message. Unity is especially important in multi-page publications such as magazines or newsletters, where the designer must achieve a consistent look across many different pages holding different content. The principle of repetition draws on the ability of the human mind to see patterns and draw conclusions from those patterns. When we see things that are exactly the same or similar, we naturally group them. We see visual connections between elements. The viewer sees repeating elements and naturally assumes that there's some consistent organizational scheme in place. Consequently, the overall design is perceived as being unified. Here in this example, you can see that these are 2 pages of a spread, and they definitely are unified even though there are quite a few differences on the page. Unifying them means the same treatment of the headlines even though they're being displayed on different parts of the page. This is also a 5-column layout where 3 of the columns is spanned over here to make the text box larger, and you can see the different placement of the images, but it definitely unifies everything and you can tell it's part of the same publication. Let's look at a couple different examples. There are potentially endless ways to use the principle of repetition in your designs. Pages benefit from simple repetition to complex repetition and all the creative variations in between. Perhaps the best place to start in using repetitions in your design is to work with typography. Set up a typographic master plan for your document and stick to it. Try using the same typeface, size, and color in your headings, subheads, and body copy. It may seem obvious, but avoid using all caps in subheadings and subheads and all lowercase in others. Inconsistency in typographic design, unfortunately, implies that the designer is not in control of the pages and does not have an eye for detail. The typography you choose and how you choose to repeat it has the power of forming a visual rhythm that you can use to increase the visual interest of your pages. What is bland and boring can be pushed into a visual treat for the viewer. Looking at this business card layout, you can see several instances of the use of repetition. The strongest and most obvious use is the circles. The repeating background provides texture for the cards and also repeats an element from the logo. By repeating the circles and the circular element in the logo, it's reinforced and the eye is drawn into the card. The circles also help to provide a subtle use of alignment since the various typographic elements align to the circles. Repetition is seen again in the use of the font face and the spacing between the various blocks of copy. Let's take a look at this initial quote. It's visually bland and boring. Let's compare it to this revised quote. The revised quote design is considerably more visually interesting because it draws on the power of repetition and also contrast. Like the bulk of the principles, repetition works best in tandem with other principles. When you use more than one principle at a time, the power increases. In the quote, the size of the words varies, along with the style of this particular typeface. Making some words bigger emphasizes their meaning. For example, the word drawing and sing are the largest, and they fill the space. Repeating the large words at the top and the bottom also help to frame in the quote. Other words are smaller because they carry less conceptual impact. They are still necessary to completely understand the quote, but they function equally as well when displayed at a smaller point size. As you can see from the contrast between the original and the revised quote, there's a lot you can do with combining bold typographic choices with the principle of repetition and contrast. Even this use of limited repetition and limited contrast dramatically improves this quote. The rewards increase when you push the design principles a little bit farther. The principle of repetition states that you repeat some aspect of the design throughout the entire piece. Repetitive elements may be a bold font, a thick rule, a certain bullet, a color, design elements, a particular format, shapes, spatial relationships, etc. Repetition works to unify all parts of a design. Repeating elements across pages creates consistency and visual unity. Repeating certain elements in a layout is a visual trick designers use to control a reader's eye and how the reader's attention moves down and across the page. Strong repetitive elements help to organize the page into visual units. Repetition helps to organize, unify, and add visual interest to a page. If a piece looks interesting, it's more likely to be read. The power of repetition lies in its ability to tie otherwise separate elements together. Repeating lines, shapes, images, colors, textures, and other visual elements within a page greatly assist in establishing a strong, unified, and cohesive design. Repetition works well by itself, and even better when combined with other design principles, such as balance, emphasis, alignment, and flow. When two or more of the design elements and principles are used in conjunction on a page, the design seems more organized and more sophisticated. Let's look at a couple of examples. The first is the Pangaea Organic. This line of body products uses repetition in its packaging. This is a great example of uses of things that are not exactly the same, but things that are repeated. So if you look at these different products, the line style, the placement, the sizing, the graphic treatment, and the font use all are repeated, and they make a cohesive packaging that's instantly recognizable as something that belongs together. Within each product, the main color has been chosen to use as the background for the labels. This color is repeated in a slightly lighter value on the packaging to identify the type of product and the scent. The simple white line art drawings appears in each product to the right and slightly behind the labels. It's easy to identify the various products as those from the same company. Pottery Barn Kids is the next example, and it uses repetition to aid in branding their store and their products. The repeated use of the blue on the cream-colored background is used from the identity packages to hang tags and shopping bags. Different whimsical drawn children combined with functional furniture are used on the ID packaging. It all appears as a simple silhouetted blue character. Repetition is seen again in the name. Pottery Barn and Kids both appear in the same font face and style, but Kids is a slightly different color. The repeated color and shade of the blue and cream, as well as the style of the art and delivery, all reinforce the company's identity. The next example is this Waldorf Astoria ad. This ad is dramatic and eye-catching. The black and the dark shapes of gray is repeated throughout the advertisement, providing a sophisticated frame for the imagery that's used. The small pictures are displayed in an interesting shape and framed in a small arrow-like shape. This box contains the diamond image and a description that supports the text. These small shaped arrow boxes are pulled from the large image that spans across the entire ad. This is a wonderful use of repetitive elements, and it really helps to unify the ad. The fonts used are treated in a similar fashion, and if you look through the ad, you'll see repeated use of alignment as well. Even though there's several alignments that are used, the function is still the same, and it definitely creates a unified ad. The last example is this Joel restaurant menu, and this uses repetition as well. You can see the clean, elegant, easy-to-read menu listing. The reason it works so well is partially because of the repetition and unity that the designer has chosen to use in the menu. The use of lines is repeated, and they help to unify the design and act as a visual to help separate the various sections on the menu. The style of the artwork is the same, even though it depicts different things. The font used follows a plan and makes for an easy identification in hierarchy and importance. The red passport stamp acts as a logo, and it's used throughout the marketing material. Its placement generally overlaps on other lines, making it feel as if it was hand-stamped. Unity is easily seen and showcased within this menu. Hopefully now you'll know a little bit more about repetition, and you'll be more aware as you use it in your designs to make your designs stand out and to deliver the message in a stronger fashion.